Okay, so as you've probably just heard, this meeting is being recorded. When you come in from the lobby, your cameras and microphones will be off. Please leave them that way, otherwise my brain will get very tired and confused from all of the things. Um, for those of you who haven't been to one of those before, my name is Jo Southall. I am an independent occupational therapist, and I also live with hypermobile EDS, POTS, and a load of other wonky body stuff. I am here as your go-to expert on self-management strategies and equipment and pacing and all kinds of other things. So if you have any questions at all about living with or managing all of your weird and wonderful symptoms, please use the chat function to send me your questions. If you're on desktop, chat should be down here, or like laptop version, web version, it should be down there. If you're on the app version, I think it's underneath you, but some formats may vary. A chat has just popped up, little message in the chat from Link Fairy, who is my glamorous assistant for this evening. So yeah, basically this is your opportunity to pick my brain with whatever you want to know. Any questions you like, stick them in the chat and we will work our way through. So what I'm going to do is just pick a topic and start talking to start with while you all get your questions down. First and foremost, very happy Spring Equinox for anyone who is celebrating today. Since it was warm today, what I thought I would start with is a little bit of a chat on seasonal coping strategies. So a heck of a lot of people with POTS type things tend to find that they are quite badly heat intolerant. So what we'll see is that a lot of people's symptoms tend to get worse when they get hotter, and a lot of people find that getting quite sweaty and quite kind of potsy and tachycardic and horrible feeling is a common symptom. So one of the things I would like to just drop in here is something called evaporation cooling. So evaporation cooling is a nice and simple method of basically cheating the sweating process, but without losing electrolytes. So when we sweat, the moisture on our skin, as it evaporates off into the atmosphere, uses heat from our bodies to achieve that chemical transition from sweat to basically evaporated water vapor. The difficulty with that is that you also lose electrolytes when you sweat. So unless you're replacing those electrolytes, if you're drinking water but sweating loads, you're going to end up still dehydrated because your electrolyte balance is a little bit wonky. So what can happen when we are basically using evaporation cooling is you take a spray bottle or like a wet scarf, or you can get cooling scarves that are designed for this purpose, and you basically wear something wet or wet your skin with an external source, so like a little spray bottle or a tap. This way, when the moisture evaporates off your skin, you're not actually relying on your sweat to achieve that cooling effect, so you get to keep all of those tasty electrolytes. So that's just one little seasonal coping strategy thing for hot weather that I thought might be useful for a few of you. I can see I've got questions popping up in the chat already, so I will dive in with those. So, how should I figure out what mobility aids could help the best when my physio is against anything more than crutches? She says people become dependent on their aids instead of exercise. I currently use a rollator and I'm seriously thinking about a wheelchair to use during my period since I get very dizzy and all my joints get even more loose and sublux. I have POTS too, so not just hypermobility issues. This is a really, really good question. And it's an attitude that a lot of people come up against with their healthcare professionals. There is a little bit of ableism and prejudice crammed into most healthcare professionals, I think. Well, most healthcare professionals without their own mobility issues. So what your physio is concerned about is deconditioning. And deconditioning is basically just your body losing the ability to do things because you're not doing them effectively. So there is a concern, and it's a valid concern, that using mobility aids can contribute to deconditioning. However, another factor that can contribute to deconditioning is you just not going anywhere or doing anything because it's too painful and you're too tired and you're too dizzy and it's not safe. So actually, the bigger risk is deconditioning and being at home miserable, whereas being out and about, being engaged in your life, being proactive, productive, happy, these things are good things. We should be encouraging those. So what I generally say to people is that if you're considering these mobility aids, generally speaking, it's because you need them. Somebody who does not have a mobility issue does not look at a wheelchair and go, oh, that seems so much easier. Because it's not easy. Like, society is not set up to be fully accessible. So if you're looking at a mobility aid and going, that would make my life easier, try it, because you're probably right. I think most people start using mobility aids later than they should because of that societal prejudice, and because of the fear that once you've got it, that's it, you won't be able to cope without it. I once actually got into an argument with one of my OT lecturers when I was a student, because he said the same thing that your physio was saying, that actually if you give people these bits of equipment, they become dependent on them. And I said, well, actually, is it that, or is it that people are struggling so badly when they have a piece of equipment, they can't imagine going back to the level of struggle they're currently tolerating? And we got into a big discussion about it. And I think we both left still thinking we were right, but there we go. But yes, basically, if you're looking at pieces of equipment like that, yes, try them, use them, see if it works. If you're in a supermarket, borrow a scooter from the checkout, like the start of the center kind of thing. Check out the Motability scheme if you're out and about and you're going shopping or something. If you're visiting any kind of attraction, try out the mobility aids there. It will give you a really good idea if that's going to be the right piece of equipment for you or not. Mobility aids for me are a kind of a risk assessment process. So if the risk of deconditioning is, there's a high likelihood of it happening, potentially, but the severity of it happening is quite low. So if you decondition a little bit, what you need to do is just have the energy to do a little bit more physio, deconditioning solved. And actually, generally speaking, if you're not using up all of your energy getting from A to B, you will have enough energy to consistently do your physio exercises and to maybe pick up a little bit of exercise. So the risk there is kind of mitigated. The risk of you attempting to walk at, I don't know, a bad time of the month where your pulse is out of control and you get a little bit dizzy and lose your balance and fall and dislocate something on the way down and injure your wrist trying to break your fall. And if you can't do that because you're barely conscious, you might crack your head open. The risk of that is significant. That's a big, scary, not very well managed risk. So from a risk analysis perspective, is deconditioning or possibly falling and injuring yourself the bigger concern? And if deconditioning is manageable through a little bit of exercise, as long as you are dedicated in your rehabilitation routine, you've managed that risk. So all you're getting out of this are benefits. Now, that's a slightly simplified way of looking at things, but hopefully it is kind of helpful advice. I think with all of the equipment stuff, it can take a little bit of time and an awful lot of money, unfortunately, to find exactly the right piece of equipment. For those of us with variable conditions, it is very, very difficult to basically to like find one perfect piece of equipment. Like, you're probably not going to be able to find this one thing that completely solves every day's mobility challenges. I have a self-propel wheelchair. It's got power assist wheels. I've also got 2 different sets of crutches, a couple of walking sticks and a rollator. I use all of them, or none of them, or some of them on a regular basis. Today I walked to the shops, carried stuff back, not a problem. Last weekend I went for a 4K bike ride on the back of a tandem. Like, these things are great. But in a similar way, walking is not a guarantee for me. And it's probably not a guarantee for most of the people working in the chat. There will be times where walking is not a sensible, safe, or pain-free option. And for those times, having the right piece of equipment to allow you to still engage with your life can be a real game changer. So there is a blog post on my website about when's the right time to use a mobility aid that might be useful. But I think basically if you can look at it from a risk analysis perspective, and you can justify the fact that actually on some days it takes all of your energy to be able to get from A to B, and you've got nothing left to do rehab, those are good justifications, and hopefully your physio will get on board with that. But at the end of the day, whether or not your physiotherapist agrees, they can't stop you using a mobility aid. Disagreeing with your healthcare professionals is your right, and at the end of the day, you're the one that makes decisions about your care. So if your physio doesn't get on board, well, get the aid anyway and prove them wrong. Sorry, that's not an ideal solution, but hopefully it's still helpful. Okay, let's have a little look. Can you recommend an alternating air pressure bed that is not composed of tubular tunnels along the length of the mattress? I'm having to sleep on my back for 4 or 5 months as I've hurt my shoulders and they're taking ages to heal and a long way to go. Sleeping on my back is beginning to affect my back. I need something that changes pressure very softly and subtly. No, in short, that's not my area of expertise at all, equipment-wise. You're looking at quite a specialist situation for that. Your best bet is probably to talk to your local social services team and see what they've got access to in terms of prescription mattresses and beds. You could also talk to some specialists, so specialist bedding providers, Baycare or Laybrook would probably be your best, Bakare, or Laybrook, Laybrok, are the two that spring to mind immediately, but I think social services are probably going to be the best place to deal with that. There will be pressure care teams within your local social services area who are way, way more experienced with that than I am. In terms of, managing that short term, another thing to consider might be actually like sleeping in shoulder supports so that you're not risking damaging yourself in your sleep as a way to speed up the recovery time. It's not always appropriate, but if you are finding that you re-injure yourself while you're sleeping, which is quite a common issue for hypermobile people, actually shoulder supports overnight might be something that would help with the recovery side of things. But yeah, sorry, not my area of expertise there. Okay. I am looking for pain management strategies for my 23-year-old son who has HSD and cervical fusion grade 1. His spinal specialist contends that he should not have pain and his does. That's a weird attitude from the spinal specialist, like, no pain for you. Yeah, that's a bit of a weird one. In terms of pain management type stuff, the first and foremost one is to listen to your body. So when I talk about pain with people, I often talk about classifying pain. So we often get like acute pain and chronic pain. So acute pain would be like Link Fairy found out earlier. I touched a hot thing, I got burned, it caused pain. That kind of pain serves a purpose. There is a direct correlation between unpleasant sensation and damage to your body. That's how pain is supposed to work most of the time. It's supposed to be there as a warning. Now, with chronic pain, what can sometimes happen is that our body's perception of like damage and pain sensation gets a little bit out of whack. So we can end up feeling pain where there is not any damage, or feeling pain where there was damage once but isn't anymore, or feeling pain because the mechanisms for pain have gone wrong and there never was damage there at all. In terms of pain management, just because pain is chronic doesn't mean it doesn't tell us anything, is the other factor. So back pain in particular, chronic back pain is one of those things where a lot of us will try to fall into the boat of like ignore it or medicate it away, or carry on and like don't kind of pay attention to that pain because it's chronic rather than acute, right? But actually sometimes there is a correlation between I did this thing and the pain flared up. So step one in pain management is working out whether this is useful pain information or useless pain information. Useful information tells you that what you're doing, or in this case, what your son is doing, is causing damage, or his body is not fit enough for it, or not prepared for it, or the posture is wrong, or something. If that's the case, what we need to look at is what's the activity? Can we modify the task? Is there a rehabilitation approach needed here? All that kind of stuff. If it's useless pain, in that there is no direct correlation between activity, posture, previous tasks, sleep, anything like that, if it's just pain that's just there, that's the kind of thing where we have a different approach. And that approach would be actually, let's get you moving. Let's try not to focus on the pain. Let's not listen to the pain, because actually what it's doing is trying to convince you not to exercise, not to move, not to do things. And that's not what you need. But we do need to work out which of the categories this pain falls into. So the other thing to look at is what kind of type of pain we're talking about here. So are we talking about achy muscles? Are we talking about neuropathic, tingly, burny weirdness? Are we talking about kind of delayed onset muscle soreness from physio or something? So it's not always the case, but there are certain strategies that are more effective for managing certain types of pain. So one of the things that can be particularly good, but I'm not sure where we stand if there's like surgical metal work involved, is TENS. So transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation. TENS is my go-to recommendation for back pain, but I would check with the specialist to make sure that it's okay to use with the surgical metal work that's in there. So TENS, you basically stick electrodes either side of the thing that hurts, and you get like a tingly electric-y sensation, and it works on pain gateway. So pain gateway is basically looking at the kind of how the way that your body prioritizes certain sensations. So Kim Clayton always explains this much better than me, but basically certain types of sensory input have a higher priority than others, and pain is actually quite a low priority. So tingly sensations, or like the magic rub when kids hurt themselves and you just give it a rub, that sort of sensation are much higher priorities. So if we can get enough sensory input that we're clogging up the whole bandwidth with pleasant tingly sensations, you can block out unpleasant ouchy sensations. So TENS can work quite well for that. We can also have a look at things like if there's a postural element. Sometimes kinesiology taping might help, sometimes physiotherapy, sometimes massage, sometimes looking at support systems. So like chairs or bracing can be useful as well to give you that kind of actual physically holding you up into a better position type thing. The other thing to look at might be actually like heat or cold, which are quite basic ones. Cold tends to be most people's preference if there's inflammation or damage, whereas hot tends to be a preference if it's kind of achiness or stiff muscles, that kind of sensation. So hot water bottles and gentle stretching are a really good combination for stiff and achy muscles. What else can we look at? Distraction is a fantastic pain management strategy. So do things that are fun, keep moving, change activities regularly. All of those are a good thing as well. Then you start looking at maybe some of your, pain management options. So if the spinal specialist is saying you shouldn't have pain, but there is pain, getting a referral to somebody who's going to take that seriously might be a good idea. There are quite a lot of medications aimed at treating pain. Some of them are aimed more for like chronic pain, and some are aimed more for acute pain. Sometimes there's a bit of an overlap in the middle there. So if you are looking at kind of chronic neuropathic type pain, a lot of the antidepressant type medications shift the levels of neurotransmitters in your brain, which alters your perception of pain. So it also means that a relatively low dose of something, so amitriptyline as an example, is probably most people's starting point for antineuropathics. To treat depression with amitriptyline, you're looking at 150, 200 milligrams as a starting point. To treat pain with amitriptyline, you're normally looking at about 10 milligrams. So it's a very, very small kind of dose starting point. And that can be particularly good for treating like pain insomnia, where you're struggling to sleep because a bad night's sleep just makes everything worse. So that kind of thing can be quite useful. Speaking to a GP about pain management is a really good thing. If your GP doesn't really know what to do with you, then ask for a pain clinic referral. You can also self-refer to physiotherapy, although, excuse me, if you've had like surgical involvement, I would imagine there's a physiotherapist attached to the team. Physios don't just do exercises, they can also have a lot of input with things like pain management strategies. So massage, infrared, TENS, ultrasound, all kinds of like hot and cold stuff, kinesiology taping, postural taping, all that sort of stuff can be done with your physiotherapist. So if you don't have a physio already, please seek a self-referral for that or get the consultant to refer. Hopefully some of that is useful. It's difficult to give advice when I don't have like the whole context for things and don't know what you've tried already. So if you want to drop me an email about that privately afterwards, please feel free. And we'll have a little chat and see what we can do. Pacing is also a really important part of pain management. So, you know, try to take regular stretching breaks. Try to not sit in the same position for too long. Fidgeting is a surprisingly effective pain management strategy. So, you know, keep going with that as well, which is a good thing. Hopefully that's useful a little bit. Yeah, I'm jboccupationaltherapy.co.uk for my website. Thank you, Link Fairy, for the thing in the chat as well. Okay. Let's have a little look questions-wise. Ooh. In-depth tips on the aspects of seeking to access financial disability support, the form, interview, etc. Please. What do HCP need to say? How detailed do their statements need to be? Do they need to cover each descriptor, etc.? Okay, so disability support is a complicated issue, and it's probably about to get more complicated because politics, which I will not start ranting about now, but have ranted about online fairly extensively already. So in terms of accessing things like PIP or like any other kind of financial disability support type stuff, how you answer the questions is often the most important part. So what tends to happen is you get an enormous booklet of questions that you have to handwrite the answers to, which causes you endless amounts of hand and wrist pain. And your handwriting gets progressively less legible the whole way you go through, and you get more and more annoyed about it. Okay. So what they'll ask you to do is comment on how you cope with a range of everyday activities. And the things covered are things like washing and dressing, preparing and eating a meal, navigating a social interaction, physically getting around, mobility, all that kind of stuff. Now, one thing that you do not get asked that you should comment on is the combination impact of all of that stuff. So, can I wash my hair independently? Yes, most of the time. Can I get dressed independently? Yeah, most of the time. Can I make a meal? Sometimes, to some extent, really well other days. Can I wash my hair and cook a dinner from scratch and get dressed and pop to the corner shop and go to work all in the same day and not end up in hospital afterwards? Absolutely not. So when you're asked about all of these things, the forms ask you in isolation whether or not you can do a task. And what you need to get across is the potential range of outcomes if you attempt to do those within the context of a normal functioning day. So there is a piece of advice floating around the internet to answer every question as if it was your worst day. Please do not do this. This is benefit fraud. You can't just pretend everything is terrible all the time. What you can do is try to communicate the potential risks of something. So can I cook a meal? Most of the time, ish. Is there a significant risk of injury, me doing that? Yes, there is. Is there a significant risk that when I'm really tired, I will skip meals if I don't have support? Yeah. Is there a significant risk of me getting cut, burnt, dislocating a wrist from lifting something heavy, passing out because the kitchen gets too hot and my pots goes wonky? Yeah. All of that stuff needs documenting and managing, and I have to have strategies in place for heat waves, for bad days, etc. So when you are answering these questions, give the widest, broadest possible answer you can for each criteria and link that to other things. So if you've had to do the everything shower where you shave your legs, wash your hair, cleanse, skincare, moisturize, whatever, is that you done for the rest of the day? If so, write that down. Make it clear that you can do that, but only that. Or you can do that, but there is a significant knock-on impact on your ability to function the rest of the time. In terms of these questions, what they're asking is not just, can you do it? It's, can you do it in a reasonable time frame with no risk of injury without it escalating your symptoms? So for the most part, a lot of people will begrudgingly agree they can sort of do a task because we've accepted that pain, fatigue, and injuries are a normal part of everyday life. But that's not what the questions are about, okay? Just because you can't change it doesn't mean it's not worth mentioning. So I would always recommend you find yourself a token healthy person when filling in these questions, and you talk to them about how easy it's supposed to be to do these things. So if I said to my partner at my last PIP renewal thingy, can you talk me through the process of having a shower? He goes, well, I just get in the shower and have a shower. And I'm sat there going, so you didn't have a 20-minute internal debate with yourself about the pros and cons, and there wasn't any kind of risk analysis step, and you didn't have to plan for all these contingencies? No. People without mobility issues, without health issues, just go and do a thing with no mind at all for the consequences. So all of that, that's the difference. Those are the things that you need to get documented. Now, if you have a healthcare professional working with you who has the ability to provide those kinds of reports or evidence that backs up the consequences of doing these things, the challenges that you're facing, the severity of your symptoms, how much work has to go into like keeping you fit and well, fantastic. But if you don't have that, don't feel like you are stuck, like you can't apply, you're not going to get there. There are plenty of examples of things that you can give, but equally it's not unusual for people to apply and not have a load of consultants. I don't have a rheumatologist right now. I don't have a cardiologist right now. That doesn't mean I don't have EDS and POTS. It just means that self-management is my only option. So as long as you've explained that the reason you don't have healthcare input is because it's incurable, there's nothing more for the healthcare system to offer you. You've justified the fact that you're then not sending 20,000 pages of evidence along with it. So talk about what you're doing, talk about your self-management, talk about the challenges that you're facing, and explain that there is no kind of magical healthcare cure that you can just phone up and they go, great, we fixed it for you. There are a lot of organizations out there that can support you with this. So the Citizens Advice Bureau often has a disability specific sector, and they have people who will work with you to fill in the whole set of forms. They'll go through it step by step, talk you through a lot of the stuff that I've done today, and a lot more in a lot more detail. Turn to Us is another one who, you know, oh yeah, Link Fairy's just put some, Link Fairy, you messaged that to me directly. I don't know if it went out to the public chat or not. But yeah, so those are another one that, you know, it's really, really good to get that support in filling those questions out, because I think if you've lived with a long-term variable condition for long enough, one of the challenges of that is that you've lost context for how easy everyday life is supposed to be. So if you've been in pain your entire adult life, that's all you know, right? So what you're trying to do is communicate your lived experience to somebody who does not understand that, but you don't understand what the starting point is for detail, do you know? So find yourself a generic healthy person to help you with the paperwork and talk about how many things you're going through on a daily basis. So hopefully some of that is sort of helpful advice. Yeah, I think. Oh yes, follow-up question. What could relatives say in their statement? Um, Again, think bigger picture and think combined impact. So think of some specific examples of ways that you have had to modify life. Try to think of examples for things that are, um, not standard. So what's the impact and how is your life harder or more expensive or more complicated, or what's the extra kind of risk assessment type steps you have to go through in order to exist? Hopefully that's like um, useful. Link to my angry rant. Physios in some areas commissioned don't do any hands-on. People have been denied hands-on support for neck osteoarthritis when surely that would have helped. Um, a lot of the time, that's a COVID precaution that has now been phased out a little bit more. So, particularly during COVID, there were a lot of like hands off. Here's a leaflet, go forth and do your exercises 3 times a day for a month and see what happens type appointments. Um, if you are um, basically more complicated than that, you're not fixable in 6 sessions of like standard exercises. Um, you can um, just keep going back and just say that you're doing your exercises, but it's not enough. What else can you do? It's okay to specifically ask for certain treatments, and it's okay to go back and say that whatever you've done in the past hasn't been enough. If you are self-referring, you can request people who are an expert in certain conditions, as an example. But equally, in terms of an osteoarthritis thing, what we're looking at is, generally speaking, building muscle up is the most kind of evidence-based approach to self-management. Something like a hands-on, like kind of massagey type thing, it's not a solution. The rehabilitation, the exercise is the solution. But if you can't get past the pain enough to do the exercises, sometimes having a step in the middle is necessary in order to get you functioning, kind of thing. So specifically asking about that is something that you can do. And you can also ask to see a more senior physiotherapist if the person you're seeing is not confident in working with you in a hands-on way. The other thing that I particularly really, really, really like is clinical Pilates type sessions. So from a physio perspective, having physios who are dual trained as movement instructory types means that you're getting a wider range of exercisey options, which are sometimes a little bit more gentle, but also a little bit more full body. So one of the things that often hypermobile people really struggle with is that our various body systems don't cooperate very well. So I can do an isolated arm exercise and I can do an isolated leg exercise, but if I try and do one that works my whole body, it takes so much concentration that I end up falling over. But trying to learn to get bits of me to coordinate tends to be the sorts of exercises that are most effective. And that's something that a lot of my patients see as well, is that actually Pilates-based movement-y approaches, myofascial type treatments can be really, really effective. So if you're not getting what you're hoping for out of physiotherapy, ask, say, complain. Hopefully they'll at least be able to give you a justification for why they can't do it, and there might be a genuine reason. If it's just kind of bureaucracy rubbish, then hopefully they can signpost you to somebody else who can help in your local area. Okay. Okay, my son, aged 11, and I both have EDS and POTS as well as other conditions and diagnoses. He finds pacing really hard. He has physiotherapists and direct exercises and OT at school. He's constantly tired, and I find the diet hard to grasp and no dietitian support out there. Also, sleep is hard as he has ADHD. Been told to go on melatonin. He has peanut ball and sensory stuff to help, but how can I support understanding pacing as he gets upset? Okay. The first step, I think, is understanding what the aim of pacing is. So pacing gets a really, really bad response often when it's not marketed in the appropriate way. So pacing is about efficiency. What we're aiming to do is for you to do more with less consequences, or to do what you're doing now, but for it to physically cost you less. So the aim is not for people to do less, it's to do less in one instance. And understanding that is the starting point to getting people on board with pacing. If we're just trying to start pacing and we go, oh, well, if you take more breaks, then you'll feel better, that equates in most people's minds to I get to do less stuff. And that's not good. But what we're aiming for is to do more stuff over time because you are less burnt out. It's about efficiency and sustainability. So when I teach pacing, I tend to focus on that, but I also focus on a couple of key strategies. I'm not going to go through my entire pacing masterclass, but please do get in touch if you'd like to kind of do it later. One of the things I focus on is micro breaks. So all we're talking about are like 10 to 30 seconds of not doing the thing you're currently doing. So micro breaks are particularly important for people with autism and ADHD. So neurodivergent, hypermobile people with POTS tend to be very, very bad at one thing in particular, and that's listening to their bodies. We basically get to the point where we just ignore absolutely all sensory input until it's completely unavoidable. And then we'll crash really, really badly and try and pull ourselves back together again. So with micro breaks, if at the very least you can stop every hour or so, ideally it would be much more often than that, but just spend 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. Tune in. How are you feeling? Are your arms and legs attached? Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? When was the last time you ate a vegetable? Have you been to the loo recently? Are you freezing cold or too hot? Answer all of those. And if you find anything wrong in any one of those areas, stop and deal with it. Now, one of the things this does is that it gets people to recognize symptoms a whole heck of a lot sooner. So probably a lot of you have been in a similar situation where you've taken painkillers when you recognize that you're in pain, and the first dose does absolutely nothing. The reason for that is that you're taking it way too late in the process. So you've probably been completely unconsciously ignoring pain for a fairly significant amount of time. When you finally recognize and start trying to do something about it, it's too late. You're already past the point of no return kind of thing. So with micro breaks, this style of pacing allows us to just tune in. How am I feeling? Actually, I am a little bit tired, or actually I have got a little bit of backache from sitting here for too long. When you've recognized that, you can take action sooner. That's the bit of pacing that I get people to start with. And the reason for that is that it firstly gets you to pay more attention to your own body, and secondly, makes it a habit for people to be proactive about symptom management. So if you recognize immediately that you've got a little bit of a niggly headache, you can go and take a 5-minute break, get some fresh air, avoid screens for half an hour. You're all good, carry on. If you don't notice a niggly headache until you get into like blinding headache, can't function, let me lay down territory, you're going to be spending the next 4 hours in a darkened room. That's a waste of 4 hours. Whereas recognizing it sooner, that's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you're good to go. You're back to being functional. So pacing is a much easier sell when you realize that actually what you're aiming to do is to avoid the crashes where you can't do all of the things. You feel terrible, you're unhappy, you're miserable, you're not engaged, and you're in a lot of pain. That's what we're aiming to get rid of with pacing. And we do that by having little tiny breaks as often as possible. Hopefully that's like a helpful starting point. There is quite a lot of pacing stuff on my website. And I do also offer a pacing masterclass, which is just a 30-minute appointment done via video chat. So anyone worldwide can do it kind of thing. So if you want to talk to me about pacing more, please do drop me an email. But hopefully that's like a useful sort of starting point for how to start doing that. And I think particularly it's useful for kids because kids tend to go and then crash. Whereas if you can get into the habit of like do a little bit, check in with yourself, do a little bit, check in, do a little bit, check in, you can preempt the crash part more often than not. So yeah, hopefully that's useful. Where are we now? Ooh, chat's jumping around all over the place. Give me a second. Can I ask about DSE aids, especially arm supports at desks, the ergonomic ergonomic chairs, arm supports for standing desks, as well as arm supports when seating. Okay, so do you want to have it? No, it's downstairs. Bear with me. I will be back with an arm support to demonstrate because I actually have one downstairs. Okay. Give me a second. Okay. Can you bring that arm support thing that's next to the sofa upstairs, please? Like, quickly. Thank you. I had a question about arm support. And I was like, I have one. Thank you. Okay, so we are back. So this is my favorite design. So this one clamps onto your table, and what you get is a kind of pivoty swivelly bit that you rest your arm on, like so. So what you're doing is basically holding your arm up using the armrest. So you're only using your muscles for direction to move around the desk. So if you're typing or using a mouse or that kind of thing, you're basically letting the support do all of the gravity assist, and you're just in control of directionality. Yeah. Now these also have a kind of switchy bit in there so that you can change the angle they're at. So if you're working a little bit higher or working a little bit lower, or you've got raised pieces of equipment on your desk, you can still use it, and then you can just lower it down again afterwards. So the original one of these was made by a company called Posturite. Posturite's original one is not cheap at all. It's very, very good, but it is not cheap. So if you are getting funded disability equipment or access to work, or your office or your company are paying for it, the Posturite one is fantastic. If you are not getting funded support, this is the Amazon knockoff. So it's from Bontec, B-O-N-T-E-C, and that is it, right there. This is the one I recommend, unless I know that access to work are paying, in which case I recommend the Posturite one. Posturite do offer basically ergonomic workplace assessments, and they offer two different styles. So one of them is done remotely, and one of them is done where they send a person out to come and look at your office and your space and learn about your job and all kinds of other stuff. If you're getting funding for this, one of those is a really, really good idea, because Posturite actually offer their own whole range of ergonomic chairs and supports and mouses and computer thingies. There's all kinds of very, very cool stuff. And those people that do the assessments, the like kind of Posturite team, are experts in all of their own products. So it's a really, really good way to get a comprehensive series of recommendations that will solve all of your desk-related needs. They offer standing desks, height adjustable chairs, different kinds of like computer mouses, mice, whatever they are. And yeah, Posturite are a really, really good place to go online shopping for that kind of thing. If you can get an assessment, I would recommend having one because they're brilliant. Ergonomic chair-wise, it's a little bit more tailored to your body type, your height, your body shape, the level of support you want, your postural anatomy in terms of like your spine, whether you prefer to have your knees lower than your hips at hip level or knees higher. A lot of hypermobile POTSI people are naturally curler-uppers. We like to have like crossed legs or to bring our knees up, and it's kind of an unconscious coping strategy to deal with low blood pressure by basically compressing our own lower body, we force that blood volume up into our brains, which is where we need it. However, you can have back problems and POTS problems that are completely kind of not cooperative. So it's much harder to comment on chairs, but armrests I can comment on, and that is the one I recommend. So hopefully that's helpful. Lovely. Oh, yeah. Ironic, since they're not taking any kind of real COVID precautions whatsoever. Yeah, healthcare is a weird kind of system at the moment now, particularly because I see a lot of long COVID patients. It feels very much like we're still active pandemic times for me. And then I talk to healthcare colleagues who are like, oh, you know, back in lockdown 1 before the pandemic ended. And I'm like, wait, what? It ended? It's done? We fixed it? Yeah, cognitive dissonance, I think is the word there. Okay, where are we going? Okay, can it help to state on forms what can't be done due to not having resources, e.g. not getting medical help due to no car and can't take public transport? Yes, it can help. So if you have been recommended or you would benefit from therapies or something, as an example, detailing on your PIP or whatever forms why you aren't doing those things because they're inaccessible to you because of X, Y, Z is definitely a sensible thing to do, yes. Okay. Sheila, you're very welcome. Okay, what can we do other than curl up to deal with blood pressure that drives the curling up? Is changing position, standing up, moving an alternative, also treadmill desks? Okay, excellent question. If you are a low blood pressure, high heart rate POTS type person, you will probably really benefit from compression stockings. So actually, if the reason we want to compress our lower bodies is to drive blood into our brains, adding compression that doesn't rely on leg crossing is a sensible idea. Any kind of physical activity that basically gets your calf muscles pumping as well is really good, because your calf muscles tensing and relaxing is a big chunk of what drives venous return. So getting your blood from your feet back up to the rest of your circulatory system. So treadmill desks can be a good thing. Also, little pedal exercises under the desk. However, if you are exercise intolerant, then that's not such a good thing. So if you are better walking than you are sat still, great. If you're better sat still with your feet up, great. But it's difficult to work out which one of those you are without some experimentation. I personally can't think of anything worse for myself than a treadmill desk. So my desk here is actually over a hospital bed, and I lay down for work more often than not, or at least sit down with my feet up, because it's just easier for me to be like slightly more horizontal with my feet elevated to at least hip height, if not higher. Whereas if I'm sitting upright, I need to fidget constantly and I need to be in compression stockings. So it's a little bit of, as much as I can advise in certain areas, the best way to work that out is to work out what your body responds best to. So if you respond really well to exercise, fantastic. Treadmill, pedal exerciser, footrest that rocks back and forth, sit yourself on a wobble cushion, those can be fabulous. You can even get chairs that are made of gym ball, but with a chair backrest on them, or sit on a gym ball at your desk and just kind of bounce around a little bit. That's all fantastic. If you are exercise intolerant or you get significant post-exertional fatigue crashes, those kinds of ideas are not good and they will burn you out quick. So if you're more of a curl up and crash kind of person, then compression stockings can still be good, but actually elevating your legs is going to be really sensible. So gamer chairs, as in office chairs that are designed for people who spend significant amounts of time fighting zombies on the internet, are a really good option. So gamer chairs often have a footrest that like collapses under the seat, and then you can fold it out and flip it over to put your feet up on. But you can still fold it out of the way in order to get out of the chair. So gamer chairs with a footrest are a really good option if you're not in a situation to be able to just get in bed with a desk and go to work from there. So yeah, have a little think about what your best options are. If you are having a change in routine or a change in exercise or a change in symptoms, always try to experiment with a few different things and keep a symptom diary and just see which of these strategies your body responds best to. Because as much as we can look at the evidence base and we can look at the justifications and the clinical reasoning for things, some of it always comes down to guesswork. I normally guess pretty well, but it is guesswork. So if you try something, try it for a little bit, see if your body responds well to it, try it a little bit more, see if it keeps responding well. If you get a treadmill desk for your first time, do not spend an hour and a half walking on a Teams call because you will crash. You just will. So yeah, see how it goes from there. And hopefully that makes a little bit of sense and gives you some ideas to try out. Lovely. My glasses, lovely glasses to help glare or something else. Oh, yeah. So I have visual stress, sometimes also known as Erlen syndrome. It's basically a visual processing issue where my eyes are technically fine, but my brain doesn't process visual information the way it's supposed to. So I get constant visual snow. I don't have functional depth perception, and I'm very light sensitive. So bright lights, blue lights, anything like that, instant migraine. Um, so my tinted lenses basically filter out the kind of blue end of the light spectrum and shift everything to a slightly warmer tone for me. And what that does is drastically reduce the glare, reduce the light sensitivity, but also decrease the amount of static I have to try and puzzle my way through. So this was actually diagnosed as dyslexia as a kid, and then kind of so I still technically have a dyslexia diagnosis. I don't think I'm dyslexic. Because one of the ways this can present in kids is inability to read, basically. So my earliest symptoms as a kid were I wouldn't sleep in the car. So most people would like take babies for a drive and they'd fall asleep. I would scream the car down the entire time. So any kind of oncoming traffic, and I would have a massive temper tantrum. Fireworks night, things like that were horrible. It was an absolute nightmare for me. I'd get lost easily if the lighting changed quickly. So like coming out of a tunnel or going out of like from a shop to indoors, that kind of thing. I was always really disoriented. Stripy patterns really confused my brain. So if anyone was wearing like cheap pinstripes where the stripes don't line up at the seams, brain can't deal with that. Stripy blinds, like the slatted blinds, stripy radiators, anything like that, my brain just got a little bit kind of confused over. So before getting the tinted lenses, I was borderline illiterate, got lost and confused on a fairly regular basis. And then mum read some stuff in the newspaper about visual stress and dyslexia and got me tested. And the first thing they did was time me reading a load of words and then do that same sheet, like a different sheet of nonsense words, but with like a yellow overlay on the top. And my reading speed doubled from a piece of yellow plastic. So yeah, that was a game changer for me. And I'm now doing a master's degree, despite my English teacher at the time when I first got my glasses telling me not to worry because I clearly wasn't really going anywhere. So if I couldn't do the work, just not to worry about it and just to sit quietly up the corner. So yeah, I'm eternally grateful for whoever realized that tinted different pieces of glass could counteract visual processing issues. But yeah, interestingly, I don't have any evidence to support this, but there seems to be a correlation between visual processing issues and hypermobility. So after working with me for my entire childhood and a big chunk of my adult life, my optometrist started asking her other patients a couple of questions. And the questions she started asking were, do you get travel sick? And do you think you're double jointed? And wouldn't you know, a whole heck of a lot of them answered yes to both. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But yeah, quite a lot of people I work with, hypermobile people that are prone to headaches, or find that like lights are quite glary or anything like that, visual snow type issues, tinted lenses. I go to a high street optometrist. There are some hospitals that do visual stress testing, but not many. So if you pop in visual stress colorimetry, and your postcode, you can probably find yourself a high street optometrist who can help with that. Lovely. Okay. Are there any electrolytes that are a bit higher in potassium that help those with the higher BP type? Any other ideas for this subtype? Okay, so for POTS people, there is a subtype of POTS people that I now fall into, even though I didn't as a kid. Didn't when I was first diagnosed with POTS at 19, and at that point I had low blood pressure when I stand. I now have high blood pressure when I stand. So the longer I'm on my feet for, the worse my blood pressure gets. So the difficulty here is that electrolytes are still useful in terms of getting hydration in. So if you're dehydrated, you need salt and you need fluids, right? If you've got high BP kind of thing, your blood pressure, what you're starting to do is to try and balance that very, very fine line between keeping enough salt in your diet to keep your electrolytes happy, but also not pushing your blood pressure any higher than it needs to be. But also you can have syncope and the high blood pressure type, which causes even more problems. So in short, electrolyte levels vary in all kinds of different brands. I do not have the dietary information to hand, but different types of salt, as an example, have different levels. So low salt, just the supermarket stuff, tends to be less sodium and more potassium. And there are certain foods that are much higher in potassium than they are in anything else. So bananas, as an example, really high in potassium. So from a dietary perspective, it might be easier to get potassium from something else, or to use low salt and then just have it on your food with water rather than having electrolyte tablets. If you have a cardiologist, I would speak to them about this. If you have a dietitian, they'd be even better placed to comment on this as well. But so that's really just from my own kind of POTS experience. It's not like an OT thing per se. Yeah, that's hopefully sort of useful, I hope, maybe. But yeah, short of reading all of the packing on things, I'm not entirely sure the best way to go about working that out. You could try speaking to a pharmacist and see if they've got any ideas as well. But I would think probably a dietitian would be your best bet for that. Okay. What can I do about overheating during normal daily chores? I'm already wearing cooler clothes before I set to do a chore. Okay. If you are a chronic overheater, I would generally skip all of the easy strategies and jump straight to my most effective, but also annoyingly most expensive one. So there is a product, it's called phase change material. Phase change material was, I think, one of the cool NASA things they invented, but then couldn't find a purpose for. So phase change material, what it does is basically set solid in the fridge or in cold water or in the freezer, and it stays at like 14 to 16 degrees for a good couple of hours before turning back into a liquid, and then you can reset it all over again. Phase change material has now been made into cool packs that sit inside a vest. So it kind of looks like a stab vest filled with cool packs rather than like Kevlar. But phase change cooling vests have been fantastic for an awful lot of people, myself included, who have really poor ability to tolerate heat, particularly when up and about and active. In the UK, they tend to only be available in the summer. They're quite hard to get hold of just in regular places. So I would keep an eye out as the weather starts to get a bit warmer. Health and Care, the supplier website, have stocked them the last 4 summers at least, possibly more. They don't have them in stock, or didn't as of last month when I last checked, but Health and Care are worth keeping an eye on. Another company that does it is Techniche and Tech Cool, cool spelled Kewl. Excuse me. So phase change cooling vests, I think, would be the solution for you. Although it is an expensive initial outlay, what I would say is get 2 sets of packs and 2 vests, or 1 vest, and then hopefully a friend or a family member or yourself will be handy with a sewing machine and can whiz you up a nicer one. because they are a little bit road crew chic. Like it's not a particularly stylish situation there. Um, my grandmother actually made me one, so I've got one that's like black with a little floral print running through it, rather than the bright blue with black elastic version I had to start with. But yeah, if you've got two sets of packs, you can have a set in the vest and another set in the fridge, and you can cycle them out constantly on busy days or during heat waves, or if you're exercising. If you're going out and about and you think you're going to be overheating later, if you get yourself little like lunch boxes, like the cool chiller lunch boxes that you can get for picnics and kids' lunches and stuff, a set of 4 packs should fit in one of those, so you can take a set of packs out with you for later in the day. But yeah, hopefully that is the way to go about things, generally speaking. What are we doing time-wise? Oh, we are out of time. Oh my goodness, I timed that well. I do have some questions left, I think. So what I'm going to suggest is I will start with those next month, if that's okay with everybody. We've got two or three left, I think. So apologies for not getting through all of your questions. It was quite a busy session, actually. I hope this has been useful for all of you. Please do come back next month. You can also message me in the meantime. You can message the HMSA as well. If you'd like to get your questions guaranteed answered, you can submit them early, and I start with those before going on to the live ones. So the ones that I haven't answered this evening, I will start with in next month's episode, so you'll get those done first. If you have any kind of follow-up questions, or you've got questions that you're not happy asking in public, please do drop me a message. My email should be floating around out there in the comments. If you can, and you have a few minutes, please just take an opportunity to click on the links areas popped in, and give us some feedback about the session. We can and have and will continue to adapt things to make them better for you. I want this to be a useful session. So if there are things that we can do to improve it, please tell me about it, and we will do our best to make this as useful as possible. Other than that, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for engaging, and I hope you found it useful, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care. Bye.